right, so this is literally what I'm referring to when I talk about the key phrase Parkitecture, which is a portmanteau of park-suitable architecture. We have, to borrow the political phrase, binders full of templates for stuff like this. So, what this represents is a continuous arms race between the mouth-breathing public, that part of your visiting public that is causing problems for you, and you as the park ranger, the park manager, the planner, trying to provide like durable, sustainable, but also appropriate and not obtrusive on the landscape, not taking over the landscape kind of facilities. All right, so for our audio recording here, we've got describe for me in your own terms what this thing is. I mean, it's a picnic table, but how is it constructed? Yeah. This is a molded single piece of concrete in, and this is important, color-matched material. Do you see how it's not like a white sidewalk mix, but that they've got aggregate sand mixed in from typically a local-ish source, or dye color matched? You can dye concrete like just like a fabric or whatever. And you can see the seam lines. This whole thing is poured as one gigantic piece, or about 5 pieces. And how much do you think this thing weighs? I mean, this concrete it's a good 4 inches thick on each of these pieces. It's like, I would call it right up there with dummy thick, you know, like. How much do you think this thing weighs? We probably need some specific equipment, even just to transport this stuff. Does that make sense? We can't go down to a Home Depot and buy 5 dozen of these for a picnic area like this and say that the problem is solved. So that tells me there's a problem. Why couldn't we go with the cheaper, easier, mass market picnic table approach? What happens if we do a simple wood and maybe, you know, like metal pipe connecting the benches to the deck picnic table? Why did we have to go with a poured concrete, custom made for the Park Service? If you take a look on this thing is badged. It's got its logo wear for the Park Service, like my very nice Society of American Foresters green soft cotton twill hoodie, screen printed with a Southern Illinois Forestry logo. Anyway, why did we have to go to this instead of a regular, much, much cheaper than this? This was custom made for the Park Service picnic table. Why did we have to go take the nuclear option?
Because this will last a lot longer and no one's going to move it.
No one's going to move it. No one can carve in it. How many of us spilled a little bit of gasoline with our stoves last night, learning how to use those? Okay. The Park Service has been on about a 40-year replacement arc with these. There are many, many thousands of these. And it's that long of a process because in a lot of less accessible campgrounds, you have to helicopter these in and out one by one. Okay? So, the idea here is that we remove the ability to carve into this idly with a pocket knife. Now, we could still do it with like a chisel and hammer or mallet, but most folks aren't coming to camp with a rock chisel and a mallet or hammer. But how many of us here have a pocket knife? I do, right? So if 1 in 4 of your visitors has a pocket knife, and a lot of your visitors at some point are going to have an idle minute or 5 around their campsite, and they got this nice big open canvas, and they have what's called in behavioral psychology a releaser cue. That is, somebody else has previously carved into this, so you think, I have knife and time and nothing better to do with my life. I'm going to carve first name, initial, last initial, X, first initial, last initial, somebody else, and like maybe a little like goofy heart shape around it. Okay, that releaser cue is a signal of somebody else thought this was a good idea enough to do it. Somebody else also, whether or not this is actually true, the perception is somebody else also got away with this because it's here and the Park Service is clearly leaving it here, so why don't I leave my mark? Hey, I was here too. If you ever saw Shawshank Redemption, Brooks was here. That's a very, very common human motivation, to leave some kind of a legacy, or hey, notice me, or what have you, okay? It's fairly low on that sort of moral development scale that we talked about earlier in class, but it's a very, very common one. And it makes sense because most people are medium to low on the so-called moral development spectrum. All right? So, this is expensive. It's gonna last a mighty long time. It's very resistant to impact. So, we are hardening by replacing cheaper, degradable facilities, with something that is almost bomb-proof, right? Like, this is reinforced concrete. There's rebar inside of it. You literally built bomb shelters out of this same stuff. Okay? So, this is a thing. And when I'm talking about Parkitecture, we're going to be looking for stuff like this. So, Parkitecture it's a picnic table like maybe you got in your backyard at home, but it's a very specific kind of picnic table. It's color matched. It's very durable. It's meant to last as long as possible. For many, many years, when the Park Service was using more regular picnic tables, they went from, the wood decked and railed ones with metal fasteners and stuff like that. They'd have to chain that to the ground and fill like a big coffee can or 10-pound can emptied out of beans or something from the camp, fill that with concrete, stick the chain in there, bury that up to 6 feet down, because people would repeatedly steal these. Because they can, right? Like, it's a horrible, obviously shitty thing to do, but like, it was happening enough that, all right, we're gonna have to pay some of our summer maintenance staff to chain these things to the ground like prisoners. Like old school leg shackles, these to the bones of the earth. Because some people just want to see the world burn, I guess. All right? So, Parkitecture is all of the stuff that we normally recognize. It's bathrooms, it's picnic facilities, it's picnic tables, it's visitor centers, it's specific campsite designs and layouts, but it's all done in that maximally durable, increasingly these days, sustainable materials and so forth. Concrete puts out a lot of carbon dioxide as it cures, but we want to kind of spend that carbon once into the atmosphere, like hopefully once a century, versus once every 5 years to put another wooden table out after it's been burned through with stoves and carved on and then stolen and then, found in a ditch nearby, or a sinkhole nearby in this case. Okay? So, Parkitecture means color matching, local materials when possible. We'll see more of that as we get to the visitor center and so forth. And things like the specific dimensions of this are just perfect for somebody in a wheelchair to pull up to the end. Have you guys ever seen a picnic table where like one or both of the seating on one side of it is truncated or cut off or shortened, and the deck of the table extends out past so somebody can roll a wheelchair right up to it? Okay, that's a thing, right? So the federal government has to hold itself to that Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA standard for any facility that is newly constructed or any substantial renovation. And in the case of a picnic table, replacing it with the durable version means that durable version needs to also accommodate a wheelchair. All right? Cool. So, Parkitecture in some places like Great Sand Dunes National Park and Preserve on summer camp means most folks don't have wheelchairs. For those that need wheelchairs in the first place, they don't have the kind of wheelchair with real fat, low pressure balloon tires, inflatable tires, that can go out on sand without sinking in and being basically impossible to push. So the Park Service actually provides those, and you can request them. I believe they're free. They're super expensive because they're not like a mass market thing, but the Park Service provides that, so anybody with a mobility limitation has equal access under ADA to access that amazing, amazing dune field and Medano Creek and all of that stuff. So sometimes the facility can be mobility-focused individual accommodations. We're going to see a lot of ADA stuff built at extremely high expense inside the cave system. The Park Service has just now, after over 100 years of operating this place as a national park, just now this year opened up for the first time a wheelchair accessible cave tour. And you know what? It's amazing. We'll hopefully see that on our historic tour. It's absolutely incredible, just the lengths that they went to. So we'll point out some of that stuff on the cave tour tomorrow, but all of this stuff collectively is Parkitecture. And the Park Service maintains detailed manuals of hundreds of pages of templates and blueprints and engineering drawings, site plans, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. You can go into like the supplier catalogs that are approved for federal use and order 100 of these picnic tables for your big campground and solve the problem efficiently in the same way that somebody else had to put in a bunch of work for. As a park manager, you also have the supporting expertise of the entire Denver Service Center, which is full of like PhD level experts that work with researchers, that work with engineers, civil engineers, hydro engineers for how do we put in a bunch of flush toilets above Mammoth Cave, stuff like that. How do we put in the flush toilets in Mammoth Cave without ruining the hydrography in there, water quality, and so forth. And the Harper's Ferry Service Center is another sort of big pool of experts they have if you're into woodworking or survival skills, primitive living skills, handwork, stuff like that. A lot of the like archaeological or historic building restoration stuff that the Park Service has to do at national battlefields, at places like the Slave Cemetery here we can see later this afternoon if you want to. They have folks that keep those traditional techniques alive, so we're not replacing hand-shaken hickory shingles on a 1700s house in Williamsburg, for example, or any of the old historic cabins here. It's all done with the right materials, the right tools, the right techniques, all authentic. And you have access to all that stuff when you're working with the Park Service. You just call them up and say, hey, we have this project coming up. Can you get us going in the right direction, or can you fabricate these shingles to rebuild this historic roof or something like that? All right, it's very cool stuff. All in support of the Park Service's mission to provide not just something that's sort of a truthy, high-quality recreation experience around this stuff, but it's the real thing. Like, it's genuine, authentic, even when it's replaced. Any questions about Parkitecture? Good? All right, moving on.